Imagine that humanity, having decided to explore a very distant planet, sends a reconnaissance probe to it. It discovers a certain substance that has no analogs known to our science. What to do? Should we test it for chemical reaction? What if it is a local organism that will die from a chemical reaction or, on the contrary, will get stronger and begin to rage, as we have seen in the films The Thing and Life? So what should we do? Modern science has over 100 definitions of life. That's a lot. Which means that researchers are still not quite sure what exactly life is. Often these definitions mention proteins and cellular structure. But an alien life form may not have any. This is also supported by the fact that at the dawn of life on our planet, there were no protein and cellular structures either. We will discuss it later. If we take all of these definitions in common, we find that living things are capable of exchanging substances with their environment, as well as growing, reacting to external stimuli, and reproducing. Let's check it out. In general, the exchange of substances is a property of almost all chemical processes. For example, a burning fire takes in oxygen from the environment and gives out carbon dioxide in return. Is it also alive? Talking about reproduction, computer viruses are programmed for this process. As for growth, the above-mentioned fire also grows by flaming the grass all around itself. An ice crystal will accelerate its growth when the temperature drops. That's a reaction to stimuli. It follows that the exchange of substances, growth, reproduction and reaction to stimuli is not an exhaustive range of the attributes of living things. Let's add another criterion: a living organism creates more complex substances in the process of exchange. It would seem that we have found the solution: all living proteins without exception, of which there are millions, have only a little more than 20 amino acids in their basis. However, the already mentioned fire seems to break our conception by creating rather complex substances. Colorless crystals like anthracene and phenanthrene. That's true, but still, there are some significant differences. The substances created by a fire are not only superfluous to it but even harmful. For example, soot extinguishes the fire, while substances synthesized by a living organism serve to improve its structure, facilitate the synthesis, and strengthen the organism's resistance to the aggressive external environment. In addition, the synthesized substances will later be passed on to new generations. The condition called accumulation and transmission of information is currently considered a basic property of life. The way this information is accumulated, be it the synthesis of substances useful for adaptation, the transmission of antibodies, or the verb touching people's hearts, is not so important. Does it mean that the non-living matter is capable of becoming alive? In order to find the answer, we need to understand, how did life arise? There is no consensus on this, and there are many assumptions. An asteroid from outer space brought it on itself, or an experiment of a super-advanced civilization. However, the answers raise even more questions. How was life born in the home world of those who brought it to ours? Studying the living organisms around us, it's hard to assume that all this diversity could have been born on its own. What if, in ancient times, there was only one form of life on Earth? Modern geologists are regularly finding stromatolites, which are layered stones formed by ancient colonies of cyanobacteria. The oldest of these rocks are over 3.5 billion years old. There is no other evidence of life from those times. This becomes an argument in favor of the fact that at that time, the Earth was inhabited only by cyanobacteria. Don't underestimate it. A bacterium is already a rather complex organism in which a variety of proteins are synthesized, hereditary information is stored in DNA, and RNA has a transmission and transportation function. What are the chances that these substances originated on their own and joined together? Not long ago, scientists discovered biochemical reactions that don't need protein. They involve only ribonucleic acid, called ribozymes. Imagine such an organism, a kind of blob containing nucleic acids. Some molecules store hereditary information, while others synthesize new RNA. Others, in turn, create a shell. So how does this creature feed and reproduce? The organism pulls the molecules it needs inside by pairing them with existing long strands of RNA. In order to form a bond in a new chain, it requires a large amount of time or a short-term rise in temperature. The third way is to use the other RNA. Importantly, this accomplishes a super task. The blob can accumulate and transmit useful data, for example, it lives. But what makes the molecules combine? Now, we know that life is born by combining non-living elements, and its main feature is the ability to store and transmit information. But there is a phenomenon that plays by the same rules, although it is not considered alive. Nevertheless, we often call it alive, albeit in a metaphorical sense. So what are we talking about? Take a look. Can you read what's written here? Of course, you can, but it doesn't make sense, as it's just a bunch of letters. And if we say that this cluster of letters is dead, we would generally be right. Now, these letters are put in the order you need to make sense of them. Have you realized what phenomenon works just like life? That's right, it's language. The oral, mental, and written language might be called alive. It accumulates information while meaning. The resemblance of life emerges by combining meaningless, for example, non-living, components of language. Also, a language can grow by increasing the vocabulary and the number of meanings of these words. It can also reproduce by forming dialects, slang, and specialized vocabulary. And here is the last argument. Many intellectuals, including poets and philosophers, explicitly say that it is not we who speak the language, but the language that speaks to us. Actually, it is not we who own language, but it owns us. People are both the environment and the tools of language. We transmit the thoughts that language puts into our heads with the help of pronounced sounds and written or typed letters. Imagine how it would work if instead of humans, language would be maintained by molecules? Wow! Wait a minute. After all, it does in fact use them. We said that in this video. Indeed, life on our planet appeared due to the use of nitrogenous bases for the formation of DNA words. This confirms the thoughts of philosophers and poets that it was the language that created humans. Life is impossible without synthesis and metabolism. The termination of these processes entails, according to a well-established view, the termination of life itself. But is the termination permanent in all cases? To illustrate, let's take the common frog as an example. It often hibernates in the same place where it lives. As winter sets in, the pond or lake freezes over, and so does the frog. Its heart stops beating, its breathing ceases, and its metabolism is mostly gone. Is life over? No, it's just paused, because all you have to do is warm the frog up, and it will come back to life. We and many forms of life around us are multicellular organisms. It is believed that such organisms can remember experiences, accumulate them and share them, affirming their individuality. But what if the connections between cells are broken? A simple experiment is startling. Hydra, a simple multicellular organism, was trained to retract its tentacles in response to a flash of light. It was then rubbed through gauze, breaking its body into individual cells and, after waiting for it to fuse together, exposed to light again. The result was staggering. The revived Hydra remembered what it had been taught and retracted its tentacles. The cells of the worm planaria do not merge after separation, but one planarium can absorb the cells of the other organism of its kind. These organisms transfer experience to each other through absorption. Therefore, by teaching something to one planarian and feeding its piece to another, it is possible to pass on the experience learned. Can humans create life out of certain components? Yes, and this is proven by scientists who managed to generate a chain of DNA, hide it in a shell, and fill it with RNA and other necessary substances, after which a completely new, previously non-existent bacterium was born. It was able to feed and multiply itself by division, even though it was created artificially. Moreover, recently another group of scientists was able to replace the nitrogenous bases, which in DNA are as important as the letters in the alphabet, with completely new ones. Scientists are thinking very far ahead. What if new life forms could live on planets with different conditions that are not suitable for us? It is quite possible that we will become the creators who will bring life to other regions of our universe. But whether we should see life on other worlds is a good question for a separate video. If you want to get into this topic, give this video a thumbs up and write the comments below.